One of the questions that I've seen a lot of education researchers ask on Twitter lately is how to start making sense of the post COVID 19 realities that schools, teachers, and leaders are going to have to confront. Part of my job is to research Catholic education and Catholic educational leadership, and this involves interpreting trends in this sector as they relate to broader trends in U.S. education. We've kind of assumed, those of us in the field of Catholic education, that contemporary Catholic schools as institutions are structurally and organizationally fragile. We're always on the lookout for the thing that might really test the limits of the way that we've set up this school system in this country. So no time like the present then to ask what's going to happen to Catholic schools after COVID-19. Kathleen Porter McGee, who's the superintendent of the Partnership Schools in New York City, a set of 6 Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of New York, summed up the angst felt by many supporters of Catholic education in an op-ed in the New York Post recently. And she says, and I quote, "The urban Catholic schools that serve our nation's neediest communities face a dramatic decline in revenue, not because parents don't want to pay tuition, but because they simply can't. For those of us who lead urban Catholic schools, these triple threats, educational, spiritual, and financial, are so daunting they're almost too terrible to give voice to in public." It doesn't help, this is me, that this global pandemic is just one of many institutional crises that have been confronted by supporters of Catholic schooling in the U.S., as well as the church more broadly. In a recent article in the National Catholic Reporter, BC's own Father Mark Massa, who's director of the Boise Center, said, "The COVID-19 pandemic joins a much longer list of cultural, religious, and ecclesiological issues that challenge the practice of Catholic Christianity in North America in the past several decades. While the virus by itself will not cause a significant challenge to being a practicing Catholic today, in conjunction with the political splintering, disaffection caused by the clergy abuse scandal, and widespread distrust of the institutional church on the part of young people, it has every possibility of abetting impulses already present within the community." So this is probably pretty clear. We're really good in the field of Catholic education, asking the question, what's going to be the fate of Catholic schools as the result of fill in the blank? And now, amid a global pandemic that could hypothetically shut down schools and could keep them shut down amid a severe economic downturn, researchers in the field are primed to consider the question of what will happen organizationally, financially, and structurally to Catholic schools as a result of this crisis. Because that's basically the thing that we've done most frequently over the past 20 years. But I found myself asking a different question recently that I think is more central to the work of Catholic schooling and Catholic education, and also more relatable in this pandemic moment of social distancing, quarantine, and tragedy. What are the examples of affirming human dignity and building solidarity that can help provide light during dark times? I came to this question after watching an address Pope Francis gave on March 27th. The Pope faced us all from an empty St. Peter's Square in Vatican City and said, "For weeks now it's been evening. Thick darkness has gathered over our squares, our streets, and our cities. It has taken over our lives, filling everything with a deafening silence and a distressing void that stops everything as it passes by. We find ourselves afraid and lost. The storm exposes our vulnerability and uncovers those false and superfluous certainties around which we've constructed our daily schedules, our projects, our habits and priorities. The tempest lays bare all our prepackaged ideas and forgetfulness of what nourishes our people's souls." The Pope, in this Urbi et Orbi blessing, which is a type of prayer given in only the most solemn moments, was alone and being broadcast digitally, and still tried his best to make sense of these times for and to inspire hope in his learning community. It made me think about all of the teachers who are still teaching right now, like we all have been here in the Lynch School faculty from our in-home offices or the spare bedrooms that we have in my case. Teaching has always been somewhat lonely and isolating, yet feels even more so now. All educators should be able to identify with this image provided by Pope Francis in this address. This is Catholic education, affirming human dignity by letting people in your community know that they are loved and that they matter even though you're physically distant. Building solidarity by reminding people that we are in this together and it's only with each other that we'll get through it. Our communities still exist even though we can't see them and can't embrace them. The means we use to reach out to them can be quite alienating, but we'll do it anyway because we can't not. So to go back to questions about the future of Catholic schools beyond this pandemic, It's true that research on Catholic education and researchers about Catholic education are prepared to analyze the fate of this sector as a result of crisis. But it's important right now to stress that Catholic school leaders and teachers have always been adaptable and resilient in the contemporary era. If anyone knows how to create teaching and learning spaces during a crisis, it's the Catholic school community. And if decades of crisis have taught us nothing, it's that Catholic education is not physical plants, budgets, or operational vitality. Catholic education is definitionally affirming human dignity and building solidarity. It's the core of Catholic social teaching. I think it's clear amid this pandemic, at least to me, that Catholic education, even if not as present in as many Catholic schools as before the pandemic, will be even more widespread because of the way that we've all come to acknowledge that educational professionals are now and have always been demonstrating the ways they've embraced these twin goals of affirming human dignity and building solidarity. The examples of people doing these two things during this time of social distancing are the same examples from before the crisis as they will be after the crisis. It's our educational professionals, it's our school leaders, it's the teachers, it's the communities that build these schools, it's the people we've always trusted to be doing this work in our communities and who are still doing this work even though they're not doing it in school buildings. So just as the Pope said toward the end of his Urbi et Orbi blessing the other day, how many people every day are exercising patience and offering hope, taking care to sow not panic, but a shared responsibility? How many fathers, mothers, grandparents, and teachers are showing our children in small, everyday gestures how to face up to and navigate a crisis by adjusting their routines, lifting their gaze, and fostering prayer? How many are praying, offering, and interceding for the good of all? Prayer and quiet service, these are our victorious weapons. So are we physically distant right now? Yes. Is it really hard for our professionals to sustain their work without just and adequate resources amid these extraordinary times? Absolutely. And do we have to take stock in the field of Catholic ed of how the system of Catholic schools in the U.S. is structured now amid this pandemic and going forward, such that we can enhance the financial and organizational resiliency of this community of schools? Yeah, and this is one strand of research that I'm currently working on with Dr. Melody Wittenbach and others here at BC. But should we wonder in the field whether Catholic education will survive the crisis? No. It of course will, because as long as there are educational professionals who value affirming human dignity and building solidarity, that's what Catholic education really is.